Hello, everybody, and welcome to our property mindset interview with Lee Roebeck. Hi, Lee. How are you?
Emma, all good, thanks. How are you?
Fantastic. I absolutely cannot wait each month for a catch up with Lee. He is somebody who's been so instrumental in changing literally so much in my life, from tiny things. And actually, I was laughing the other day. Before I met you, Lee, I'm not sure if I shared this story with you. I was terrified of the dark, like abnormally so. I couldn't, and it was a time thing. So after kind of 9 o'clock, if I had to walk to the car in the dark, I'd have to get one of the kids to come with me. It was
As a grown woman, you
like a
reminded me of
grown.
my mother.
Yeah. Okay. And then I suddenly realized, after a couple of years of working with you, I suddenly realized, and now I have a massive walk from the house up to the car, along a hedge, we've got a long garden. And I often, like, I do B&I, don't I? So 5 o'clock in the morning, it's dark, it's cold. Don't even think about it. Couldn't believe it. So anyway, I digress far away from where we are today. But that is what would really be something very powerful in mindset. And I didn't even know that something that had been quite debilitating for me had changed in my time from working with Lee. So that's how powerful. If that one small thing was something that happened, imagine all the other things that can happen. So for me, property mindset is so key and so important. And you can do well, I think, in and around property, in and around life. But if you can add in that mindset element and really work daily on it, it is transforming. And that's what I found with Lee, how he's helped me. And that's why I feel so grateful that he comes on each month, or has done for a while, to talk through something that can really help us. And so, if you've got that chance, really sit down and listen to this. And today we're talking about the attitude of success. And actually, just even as a title, that might not be that clear to some people. So, Lee, before we kick off with that, please, anyone who perhaps doesn't know you, please give us an introduction to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. My name is Lee Roebeck, and I'm a mindset mentor for leaders. I help entrepreneurs, business people, professionals align their mindset for what it is that they're going after. Because often, you might set a big goal, or you've got some sort of ambition, but you lack the confidence, or you lack the presence or the habits, everything that you're going to require to become that man or woman. I help people grow into that. So I help them shift ideas that's buried deep inside of them. And I work with people all over the world, just like Emma. And these individuals are getting remarkable results because of the ideas that we teach.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And brilliant. So let's jump straight into this. The attitude of success. I mean, how does that work? I mean, I can understand, I know what a good attitude is, and I know what being successful is, and especially in property. I mean, we were just sharing a moment ago. I'm very excited. I'm just about to complete on a really big property purchase. And I was saying literally last Thursday, so less than a week ago, I'd literally, in my head, I'd said, that's it. I'm going to get a job, which is hilarious because clearly nobody would employ me. I said, that's it. I'm going to get a job. This is not going to work. But it was only a couple of, maybe 5 minutes I allowed myself to wallow in self-pity. And then I kind of picked myself up, and less than a week later, I mean, we're literally, it's all over the line, and it's all good. So I do understand that kind of attitude and success. But just to explain a little bit more about that, Lee, for us.
So you always have a choice, right? It's attitude is all about perception, and I'll explain what attitude, what I thought it was, and what I've come to realize that it really is. Um, Attitude is your perception. Like, you can see a problem in that experience last week, right, Emma? Or you can catch yourself after those 5 minutes and you say, this is part of the process. This is just another hurdle. This is a challenge, but there's growth here. There's, if I overcome this, there's growth involved. So it's all about perception. But in terms of, setting this up, what attitude really is, I used to think that attitude was, someone's just upbeat. They're always smiling, or they're always trying to make things happen. I just thought that was someone who had a positive attitude. Like, that was the attitude of someone who was successful. But I've since changed my mind as I've studied deeper into attitude. Earl Nightingale, who's known as the Dean of Personal Development, in fact, he started the personal development industry in the recorded fashion. I think it was in 1960 or 61, with the strangest secret record. And he said attitude is the magic word. And it really is. When you understand it, it is the magic word, because attitude is not simply you're always smiling, you're upbeat, got a spring in your step. You've got an attitude to everything. Like, you've got an attitude to what we're speaking about right here, right now. You've got an attitude to the way you started your day. You've got an attitude to your kids, right, Emma? You've got different attitudes to each of them. You've got an attitude to whether you're going to make a sale today or not. You've got an attitude to how you dress. You've got attitude is all encompassing. But then we've got to go one step further, and I'll bring a slide up here in a short moment. I want to actually show you on a visual representation. I want to show you what attitude is. But when we really break it down, attitude is your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. So attitude is not just your thoughts, or it's not just your feelings, or not just your actions. It's a composite. So when all three of those things are brought together, your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, and it's congruent, that is what attitude is. So you've got thoughts, feelings, and actions towards what we're talking about right now. You might say, this makes sense, this is intriguing, I want to listen to this. Or you could have different thoughts and different feelings around what we're discussing, right, Emma? But it's everything about you, and it's one of those things that we've really got to check. Like, we've really got to own our attitude. I mean, I work on this all the time, and I don't know if I've quite mastered it, but I mean, I'm better at it. I just like you, Emma, I catch myself when I find my attitude going down the wrong track. But I mean, we obviously don't always get it right. But I think we got to start out with understanding what attitude is before we can really develop an attitude of a successful person, the attitude of success.
This was mind-blowing to me when you really started to explain this to me, and I started to understand it. Because equally, like, all my life, people have said, oh, you've got a really positive attitude, haven't you? Because I'm pretty smiley, and generally, I'm polite, and I'm quite bubbly. I've got a bit of energy. But I could not understand, I did a lot of kind of self-development, and it was all like, have a positive attitude. And I thought, I've got a blooming positive attitude, but I'm still not getting the success that I wanted. And when you broke it down into thoughts, feelings, and actions, I was able to really layer that up. So I just remember, for instance, going into letting agents when I very first got into property. Okay. So my actions were, I walked in and I was smiley. There were a lot of feelings. I was pretty nervous, kind of felt a bit sick. But I'd also done a lot of action. So I'd prepared things. I had some leaflets with me, which were hilarious when I look back on them. They were so, I couldn't even imagine. But, I'd worked really hard. So lots and lots of action. and lots of feelings. So I was scared, nervous, you know. But then my thoughts were all about, they're never going to take me seriously. They're never going to rent a property to me. What on earth do they think of me? I think I'm probably wearing the wrong clothes. I think they're going to think I've got no money because I've got the letting agent. In fact, I have no money. That's why they're going to think I've got no. And literally this montage of kind of thoughts were going through. And it was at that point when you pointed it out to me that suddenly I was able to see, when you break it down into thoughts, feelings, and actions, you actually got something to work on. Because I didn't think I had anything to work on before. I had what was perceived as a positive attitude. And so that was absolutely huge to find that. And you see that as well. I actually had a mentee the other day who went all the way to a networking event and then didn't go in because she was so worried. And I completely understand her. It was a huge event. And she did do something positive with it. She went to a local bar and she did some journaling and all of that. So, you know, it was a good thing. And now she feels really confident next time. But you can just see how these kind of thoughts and feelings can really affect what you do. So, yeah, I mean, it is a tremendous thing to be able to have somebody like yourself explaining how you can make those changes.
So, Emma, is it no wonder walking into those letting agents when you started out that you were nervous? Is there no wonder if you were getting involved with that sort of thinking? And here's the thing. I was doing a training yesterday in an area called Sunninghill here in Johannesburg. And I said to the group, I said, before you even open your mouth, when you walk into the room, you've already announced yourself, and you announce yourself with your energy. Like people sense you, they feel you, they see you, right, Emma, before you even utter a word. Because people feel it. I mean, our body, your body is a mass of energy, and you casting off millions of cells per second, right? People call it the aura, the spirit, whatever you want to call it. And this is what we sense. This is what we feel. So if you're in that anxious, doubtful, nervous state, when you walk into that letting agent's office, they're not going to feel comfortable around you. And I mean, as much as you were taking all that action, getting in front of people, what was your results like? Because your attitude obviously wasn't that of a successful person yet at that point. I mean, obviously a lot is, but at that point, what was your results like?
Quite average. I mean, I kind of joke that, especially because I was doing rent to rent service accommodation where you rent and then you legally sublet it. Yeah. And, you know, so most people, let's be fair, at the beginning of their journey, maybe have this kind of thoughts, feelings, and actions that I had. And so that you have to go through a lot of no's. And I did go through a lot of no's. And quite a few times I actually paid. In those days, you could kind of pay a pre-deposit. And I paid that deposit. So, of course, I just thought, oh, this is it. And then, no, it would ping back into my account. No, sorry, you failed. You haven't got it. And so, yeah, a real roller coaster.
Look, it's, I think something we've also got to add on top of that explanation of attitude, right? So if you're just joining us, if you just hopped on now, attitude is a composite of your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. But it's got to be congruent. All three of them have to be aligned for the results to shift on the outside. Because let me maybe break it down to explain how it might not be aligned. So somebody could have a thought of doing something good for someone, but they never step out and take action on it. They don't have a good attitude, right? Or you'll find some individuals do something nice for people. So they do something nice, help them, but their motive is to manipulate that person. That individual also does not have a good attitude. So it's where you thinking positively or you thinking from a good place. So like if you're being generous or you're helping someone, the thoughts are good. You just put in the good out. The feelings you're involved in is positive, and your actions are lined up with it. That's when your attitude is congruent or aligned, and that's when you have a positive attitude. So attitude is not just your actions alone. It's not just your feelings, or it's not just your thoughts. It's all three of them brought together. My mentor used to say that it's much like a cake, a piece of cake. If you were to go to someone's birthday party and they give you a piece of cake, you wouldn't say, this is good vanilla essence or good spice or good flour you used here. You'd say, this is good cake. And the cake is a composite of a number of different ingredients that are brought together that give you that cake. So attitude is the same. I think Emma, if you're okay, let's bring the slide up here. I want to show our audience exactly what attitude is with an illustration. Can you see my screen, Emma?
Hold on, let me just add that in.
Alrighty, hopefully everyone else can see it. But here's a model of the mind. Now, you see a couple of circles and a couple of lines, and you might even think, this is a laughable image.
Can I just say, Lee, before you start on this, for anyone who's listening now, exactly as Lee says, this might look silly. And I absolutely thought that probably for about 6 months working with you, Lee. And then suddenly the penny dropped. So if you can stop that 6 months of thinking it's silly and really, really read into this, you will have some big changes. Sorry, I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you. I'll add on top of that, Emma. I thought it was silly the first time I seen it. But I've been studying this image every day since December 2016 and applying it to different things like goals, habits, attitude. And that's what we're going to show now with attitude, fear, even salesmanship, selling. It's an extremely powerful image when you really understand it and apply it to those different areas. The big circle, that is your mind. And your mind is divided into two, right? The top half being the conscious mind, the bottom half being the subconscious, and then, of course, the circle at the bottom, that's your body. Now, before we go into what attitude is, your conscious mind, that's your thinking mind. It's your analytical mind. It's where you pile the books up. That's where your faculty of memory lives. That's where you pile the books up. Your subconscious operates very differently. Your subconscious is the emotional part of your personality. A lot of people, when we think of the emotional part of us, we think of this physical pump in the middle of our chests, right? Yet the ancient and the wise Greeks, they said that your subconscious is the heart of hearts. Now, this is not my image. It was an image that was originated by a doctor out in San Antonio, Texas in 1934, a doctor by the name of Dr. Thurman Fleet. And he said, he was in the healing arts. He said, in the healing arts, we are treating symptoms. And he said, until we treat the root cause, which he believed to be the mind, he said, we're only going to get temporary results. And he said, no one's ever seen the mind. I'm going to create an image. And this is the image Dr. Fleet drew. Now, there is a thought power that's constantly flowing to and through you. And this thought power, it never stops. And when it flows into your consciousness, it just is. It's neither negative or positive. It just is. It's neutral. You make it what it is by virtue of the thoughts that you think. So remember, we talk in attitude. We're setting this up and we're showing you where the attitude of success, where it starts. So the thoughts you're having about this deal that's on the table, the thoughts you're having about prospecting, walking into those letting agent offices, the thoughts you have of picking up the phone and calling investors or hosting investor days, whatever it is, right? Those thoughts, when that thought power flows in, it's neither negative or positive. You make it negative or positive by virtue of the thoughts you think. And whatever you think and get habitually involved in, that dictates the feeling state of your body. It dictates how you feel. When someone says, I just don't feel good, what they really saying, because feeling is a word that we've invented to describe conscious awareness of the vibration we're in. What they're really saying is, I'm consciously aware that I'm not in a good feeling state, that I'm not in a good vibration. I'm not feeling well. I'm not in a good vibration. Because those thoughts, like if you get involved in doubt and worry, right, Emma, and that's a constant pattern, habit for you, you're going to be in a very low vibration. Your feeling is going to be you're going to feel fearful, nervous. You mentioned it when we started out, right? But here's the thing, those thoughts that you habitually getting involved in, it's sent out as a charge into the universe. Now, I know that could sound like way out there for many people, but it really is sent out. And how we can qualify this is, have you ever felt, Emma, maybe in speaking to someone, or maybe just an experience, meeting someone. Have you ever felt sometimes like somebody, it almost feels like this person's reading your mind? Have you ever felt that?
Definitely. In fact, recently I was on a holiday and I met somebody who just seemed so congruent with me.
With your thinking, like almost like, how did you know that? I was just thinking that, or it's almost like they're giving you feedback before you even ask the question. I mean, I've experienced that. There are people that are very skilled at picking up those thoughts that are sent out. Now, the feelings that you get involved in as a result of the thoughts, that is impressed on your physical body, because the feeling exists in your subconscious mind. The subconscious exists in every cell of your body. And so it's impressed upon the physical body. But not only that, those feelings are sent out into the universe. And once again, people don't only pick up on the thought energy, they pick up on your feeling state that you're projecting out into the universe. Like when you walk into that investor's office or that letting agent's office, are you confident? What's the state you're in, right? Because they can feel it. Once again, it announces you before you even open up your mouth to say anything. A good way to qualify how both thoughts and feelings are sent out into the universe. Have you ever maybe been on holiday? Let's say you're from London, you're in the UK and you go on holiday. Let's say, do you guys like going over to Thailand, to Phuket, Emma? Is that a popular destination?
It's quite a long way from us. We would normally go to Europe, so we might pop over to Spain or France, or as far afield as kind of Egypt, Turkey. Those are kind of like our main places.
So let's say you go down to Nice, right? You're on the Mediterranean there, you're on holiday, and you're walking down one of the streets there, and you get this hunch or this feeling like, I got to call my mom back home in the UK. And the next minute, bang, you look down on your phone and there your mom's calling you. Now, I mean, a lot of us have experienced that, right? Did she call you because you were thinking of her, or did you think of her because she was just about to call you, right? These thoughts, I promise you, they are projected out into the universe. My mentor, Bobby, used to say that it's 100% evenly present in all places at the same time. The feelings that you project, and this is something I think we can all relate to. Have you ever been in someone's company and you talk with them for maybe 5 minutes, but it feels like an hour's passed or half an hour because they're in such a low vibration, like their energy literally sucks the life out of you? I'm sure you can relate to that, right? Or have you ever been in someone's company and you're having a conversation with them and an hour has passed by and you're like, look at your watch and you're like, gosh, it felt like 10, 15 minutes, but an hour has passed by because their energy is just so good, right? You really feel good around them. And that's one way you can qualify these feelings that you send out. But the
And
feelings, did you
sorry,
want to say something?
I think with that as well, Lee, I think we see that a lot. Well, I certainly do in when I go to property investing network meetings.
Yes.
And you'll go in and you'll talk to somebody and they'll be talking about their properties, and I've got this property, and they may say, oh, so this property, this has happened to it, but this is how we've overcome it. And so they're talking what I would call factually, and it's really interesting and really great. And then the next person you speak to, they might have the similar type properties, but suddenly it's kind of like it's as if they're, oh, and this has happened and it's so terrible, and on top of that my wrist hurts and my head hurts. Oh, and everything's just a problem. And I really,
the sky is falling.
yeah, and everything's, and I just literally just sit there listening to them, and equally they haven't asked like one question back. It's kind of like almost this like splurge, isn't it? So yeah, you're absolutely right. I look at these people, I try and be as polite as possible and just say, it's so lovely talking to you. I'm just going to go and catch up with, these other people, or however I do it, because it just, there's no, they also, I'm not sure they even know how to improve themselves, or I don't even think necessarily they even know that there's an issue. So yeah, absolutely, I completely see that. There's a few people that are like springing to mind of recent experiences, compared to others that you talk to, and you're just inspired and motivated, and just can't wait to go back and speak to them.
Now, it's the feelings that moves the body into action, right, Emma? And action, and I know you might not be able to see this clearly on the screen. Can you maybe pop the two of us to the top of the screen in the meanwhile, Emma?
No. Oh, okay. No.
Right, it's fine. It's fine.
Sorry.
Okay, so I'm hoping you can see that that's actually results, even though it's hidden behind the video of the two of us. But it's your actions that lead to results. So what is attitude? Here it is. Bingo. 1, 2, 3. Attitude is a composite of your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, right? So once again, it's when all three of those are congruent and they are moving you in the direction that you want to go. So you can't be thinking thoughts of this is not going to happen, but then taking action. You've got to know it's going to happen. You got to feel it. Feeling's a secret. Like, you really got to get involved with the emotional state around that. And then you got to step out and you got to act on it. And, attitude is something you really want to master. Like, you really want to get on top of this, because something else Earl Nightingale used to say, good attitude, good results. Fair attitude, fair results. Great attitude, great results. Obviously, if the attitude is poor, you'll experience the same or similar. There's a really powerful, did you want to comment on that, Emma?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think, I don't know if you're going to say this, I don't want to steal your thunder, but one of the things that you talked about is this kind of the time that you give to the thoughts that you do. And one of the things that one of the descriptions that you gave me that was so incredible is that if you imagine that you've got a garden and you have good thoughts and you keep giving them attention, they grow. But whether those thoughts are good thoughts or bad thoughts, they grow. And that's the thing. The more we just concentrate on, the ones that are not giving you the results that you want, that's never going to be a good thing. So it is looking at kind of really changing, because if you're constantly thinking, and it's amazing, isn't it, Lee? When we mentor people people often don't even realize, and it's actually the ones who verbalize what they're thinking that is easier. You know, when they're saying, you hear them, they say it, don't they? It's things like, oh, well, of course I've got no money, or I can't afford to buy property, or, you know, why would anyone trust me with their property? And they verbalize it. Actually, those ones I find a lot easier, because you're able to reflect that back to them and sort of say, listen to yourself. Whereas it's the ones, I think, a bit like me when I first started out, because I did speak pretty positively, and so it almost looked like it was you know, I was thinking great things too, but that just was not the case. I just was not thinking in a positive way, and therefore it was almost sort of, you know, I gave it the time, and I gave it I nurtured it almost, and therefore those grew. Because it's a bit like if you say, you know, look at that, I don't know, orange house, and suddenly you'll see lots of orange houses randomly, because the more you focus on something, the more it comes to you, doesn't it? So it's almost like that. Yeah. So I found it, yeah, very interesting.
Look, it's you know, anybody that's starting out their mindset journey, I think we've got to be gentle with ourselves, and also I think we got to try and be understanding when it comes to others, right, Emma? Because the average individual has around 60,000 thoughts a day.
Wow.
And if you haven't been trained in your mind, or you haven't been taught, like if you grew up in an environment where the general attitude, or the general approach, or the beliefs, the ideas in that environment were positive, that's obviously going to be programmed into you. But for those of us that don't necessarily come out of an environment like that, you know, we got to be gentle with ourselves, because those ideas are so deeply inculcated, like they're so deeply embedded within us, that, you know, in the beginning it takes a lot of work. Like it really does, you know, Emma. And it's impossible to audit those 60,000 thoughts a day. Like it's really, you know, I think it is, you know, and it's we got to catch ourselves, or we've got to be observant of the thoughts that are constantly coming. But here's a quick way for you to figure out if your thoughts, your feelings are moving you in a good direction. Just ask yourself, how do I feel? How do I feel? If you feel good, if you have a spring in your step, you're energized, you feel good, that's a good sign. That's a good sign, because that tells you what sort of thoughts you've been habitually getting emotionally involved in.
And I think that, I mean, you talk a lot about gratitude. And so as I mentioned, I've got a walk now where I walk from my house all the way up a long garden to the car. And I used to, when I first met you, Lee, I used to just, that walk was just full of what's happening with the kids. I'm now running late. I've forgotten to do that. Oh, how are the children feeling? Was I, you know, I mean, really detailed stuff like, oh, I was a bit abrupt with my daughter this morning. Will she be upset? That's affected her for life. She's probably now going to have a nightmare life. She's never going to be successful. You know, like the most ridiculous thoughts I would have. And a lot of worry. I had an intense amount of worry. So the kids do lots of extreme sports as well. So I mean, my mind was just full of it, absolutely full of it. Whereas now, and I have to force myself to do this. This is not a natural thing. I now walk along the path, and obviously at different times of the year, and I go, I mean, admittedly, sometimes I do think, gosh, it's cold. The hedge has just rubbed water on me. But what I try and do is go, wow, look at that beautiful plant. Look at that lovely bird. And I listen, and it's like, what are that? And then I look across and I see a horse, and I see this. And so I really attempt to be very grateful for that. And this actually reminds me, because, you know, this is something that I have to keep repeating to do. As I say, it's not a natural thing. But what that does is, rather than filling that moment full of all of those thoughts, it suddenly completely changes my perspective. And actually, I really enjoy it. And by the time I get to my house, it's only a short walk, but by the time I get there, I feel totally different. totally different and really energized. And I think that's the thing. I had a thing yesterday where somebody made a few comments and I mulled over them because I really want to understand what they meant. And I mulled over it, but God, it sucked the energy from me. And I felt very tired. And so I had to be aware of that and change the way I was thinking about it. Exactly like you said at the beginning, you said something about, just really understanding that. And it was the perception it was the perception. I just changed my perception of what they'd said. And I used it as a growth because I was upset. I was a bit angry. I felt that they weren't doing the right thing. But when I turned it around, it was kind of like, well, if I walked away from that person, what would I lose? And actually, I felt I would lose a lot. So I was happy to accept the way they thought about something because actually, it's their thoughts. It's not, I don't have to let it affect me.
You don't need to get emotionally involved.
Yeah. And I think that's really powerful, being able to see that difference. So yeah, that simple one of it's not a property thing, but equally, it can be a property thing, wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, you have these certain thoughts, your feelings and your actions, and then just changing something can dramatically change things. And that's been huge for me.
But I think what we've also got to, why I said maybe be a bit gentle with ourselves. Emma, in the beginning, it can feel like work, right? But like anything else, right? If you start a workout routine, if you start eating healthier, if you start thinking better, in the beginning, it's work. Like you've got to, why? Because your habits, they're so deeply ingrained in us and they're part of that paradigm, part of that subconscious programming. It's not going to happen bang like that. Like it's that practicing the gratitude every day, walking from the car up to your door and replaying those constructive thoughts. You maybe done it 1 or 2 days and then you fell back into the old routine or old pattern, right? But if you do it day in, day out, or like you have been with me, Emma, for months, we've been at it for months, working on the mindset, upgrading the mindset. Eventually you get to a point where it's just normal, it's natural. Like that's your mode of being. That's how you are, and that's obviously when things can really shift. There's two powerful stories that I really want to share on attitude, because I want to show the audience, whoever's listening to this, I want to show you how our attitude controls our results, firstly, but also how, regardless of what the experience is on the outside, you can still control what's happening inside of you in terms of your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, right? Your attitude. So the first story I'm going to read, Emma, is from this book, My Father Knew the Secret, by Brian Proctor, by Bob Proctor's son. Have you got a copy of this book, Emma?
I have not. I will get one.
You have to get a copy. It is especially for those of you, if you're listening to this and you love Bob Proctor's work, you love his philosophy, these are personal stories from a son's point of view. His son, Brian, his eldest son, growing up with his father. If you're a Bob Proctor fan, you really want to get yourself a copy. I'll read it again, or I'll say it again. The book is My Father Knew the Secret, by Brian Proctor. And in the first chapter here, Brian says he's telling a story about, his dad at the end of his life. Bob passed in February 2022. And Brian says here, a few days earlier, when we were in the hospital, it was clear that the end was coming. He says Dad knew that he would be leaving us, and he was adamant about coming home. So obviously Bob Proctor didn't want to die in the hospital. And no was not an answer he would accept. Dad focused on only making that happen. At that point, he was in the intensive care unit, and his visitor list was extremely limited. My father needed to see, touch, and say goodbye to his 11 grandchildren personally, along with some special friends. As you can imagine, he was not doing very well. But despite this, he continued to make anyone in his presence feel special. He was true to his being right until the very end. So we talk in attitude, right? Controlling it. The old man's on his deathbed here, and he's still treating everyone around him special. Brian goes on further to say, while we were waiting together, so they had now given permission that he could go home, right? And Brian says, while we were waiting together in his room for the transport team to arrive, we held hands and he was smiling. I could feel his energy. The ambulance attendant soon came in with a gurney to begin the process of transporting him home. When these two men walked into the room, Dad was so happy that he was going home that he lit up just at the sight of them. And as anxious as he was to get the process going, he did what you'd expect Bob Proctor to do. He made these two men feel seen. It was a powerful reminder of the great principle my father lived by. And you know the principle he lived by, right, Emma? Was to leave everyone with the impression of increase. Leave everyone that you meet better off. Brian then continues. He says, Dad looked at the first gentleman and he said, wait, first tell me, what's your name? And he answered, Muhammad. Dad looked him in the eye with a smile and said, Muhammad, that's a powerful name. And he then looked at the second man and asked him the same question. And the second guy replied, Torag. Dad said, I love that name. It's unique. Both men paused and they stood there for a moment looking at my father. So obviously this old 87, 88-year-old man, they obviously know his situation. He's going home to die. And obviously they had certain feelings about him walking into that room. But Brian says here, they stood there for a moment and they looked at my father, and then they had no idea who he was. But Dad had put such a smile on both of their faces, and he was wrapping them in kindness. That kindness he showed those two men caused them to be even more kinder to him, which was nice. They gently moved him to the stretcher and were about to wheel him out when he did something I will never forget. So as they about to wheel him out of the hospital room, Brian says his dad done something he'll never forget. Emma, he put his hands up into the air and he said to them, Muhammad, Torag, take me home, boys. And he said it with such enthusiasm, Brian says, that he surprised all of us. What an incredible frame of mind to have or to be in when making your final journey home. It was unbelievable and extraordinary at the same time. I mean, imagine that, Emma, having that sort of attitude and you know you're going home to die. I mean, you're excited about it. And Brian, in the book, he talks about how, while he was in ICU, they had been putting all these IVs, obviously, I mean, as happens in hospitals, right? Up him. And, Brian says, my dad wasn't really big on needles. And he says this one time, this nurse walks in and she's looking for a vein. She can't find a vein and she's literally pricking him all the time. And Brian says, my dad didn't like needles. Like he wasn't big on it. And the lady, the more she couldn't find a vein, she was getting nervous and uptight. And Brian says, he just put his hand on her hand and he says, you're doing a great job and take your time, don't worry about it. And he really calmed her and he made her feel comfortable. But this is the sort of thing he was doing and how he was controlling his attitude, maintaining an attitude of success, even facing death. And when they wheeled him out of the hospital, when these two gentlemen wheeled him out, Brian says there were a line of doctors and nurses and, orderlies, people wanting to say goodbye to him and just touch him. He had that sort of impact or effect on those people. So, I mean, how often do we talk about attitude and we say, that one done this or this person, and then our attitude goes out of the window, or good attitude goes out of the window, a positive attitude, when here you can be faced with something impossible, literally death, and still be maintaining a positive attitude. And Brian started out there by saying, my dad maintained. He says here he was true to his being right up until the very end. What do you think about that story, Emma?
Well, one, it's incredibly emotional. But the thing that really resonates with me is clearly he'd worked so hard on the feeling of fear. So generally, most of us, it's one of the, I can't remember, but there's top 5 fears that everyone have in their life, and one of them is dying. It's a pretty big one, isn't it? I definitely, I don't think I fear so much me dying, but I fear the fact of what gap there would be left because I've got young children.
Yes.
So that's really what I would be very fearful of. Like I would do everything to make sure I'm there for them. But what we have there is this kind of, fear of dying, fear of needles, fear of all those things. And one of the things that he kept going right till the end, I mean, he made massive impact to the world in his 80s, when most people are like gibbering wrecks in a wheelchair, given up on life, that kind of thing. He literally was still impacting not just a few people, but thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And the one thing that he talks about is his goal, isn't it? Of when you have a goal and you're going to hit like a point of where you're really fearful, and everyone has it, but you've got to work through it. But what happens is, when we've been talking about these kind of thoughts that come into your head, and he would always say that he would think, Bob, you don't need to worry about that. Like, what you don't need to do it, Bob. You've got plenty of money, you've got plenty of friends, you're really successful. You don't need to do that. But it doesn't matter who you are or where you are, you're still going to get those thoughts. They might not be Bob's thoughts, obviously, but you're going to get those thoughts. And he always made this thing that unless you're growing and going through that kind of fear barrier, that pain barrier, you're going to be dying, basically. So you're either growing or you're dying. And that's exactly what he did, didn't he? Right till the end. I mean, that's, hugely kind of emotional for me to see somebody who has so much control of their thoughts and their feelings and their actions. And exactly as you said, he was clearly going to be in a lot of pain. He was clearly probably was perfectly, within his own remit to feel a bit sorry for himself. Let's be fair, we've all done it, haven't we?
That's what most people would do, right? And understandably so. And understandably so. I was thinking something earlier, and you kind of reminded me about it now. Thoughts are so powerful. Like, thoughts either take energy away from you or they energize you. If you're getting involved in negative thoughts, it's literally chopping at your energy levels. People say, "Oh, I don't have energy," or I feel this way. It's because you're habitually getting involved in the wrong sort of thinking. If you're getting involved in constructive thinking, it energizes you. How could someone like Bob go up until 87 and a half years old? A month before I think he passed, he done his last worldwide public webinar. So, I mean, he was going right till the very end, or month or two before. And this was because his work and the sort of thinking, the attitude that he was getting involved in on a habitual basis, it was energizing him. Like, this might sound crazy, right, Emma? But I think we can actually get more youthful the older we get if we are channeling our thoughts in the right direction. Because, I mean, imagine being 70 or being 60 and having the energy of a 15-year-old. Someone listening to this right now is saying, that's a load of bollocks. So what, am I allowed to use that word here, Emma?
Not really, but it's fine. You've said it.
But it is possible. Like, it really is. I mean, It's really important that you get involved in the right thoughts, feelings, and actions, that
I,
you
I want
maintain a good attitude. Yeah.
I really want to touch on that because absolutely, you hear so many people, you know, doing a role or, you know, whether it's in property and they talk about, say, for instance, people with tenants and they'll talk about them like, oh, they're just, you know, some of them would be like, oh, I've got these tenants and they're this and they're that. And I just kind of think, gosh, you know, if you're talking about basically your clients like that,
Like that.
that's not great, is it? And then there was a chap that I was listening to the other evening. It was just amazing what he was saying. He was saying things like, you know, and these are our tenants, and this is what we offer them. You know, we offer them, you know, we offer to do their dry cleaning, we offer to do extra cleans for them in their rooms because these are busy people, and it's not much. We want to add this, we do this, and we do that, and these great people. And it wasn't like he didn't have some problem tenants as well. You know, he did describe an incident where he'd been owed a tremendous amount of money, but he just talked about it in a very, you know, this has happened and these are the ways we went around overcoming it. And it was so different and it was so refreshing to listen to it compared to others. I mean, I've got a recent one and all they keep saying is, oh, this you know, what I do, it's just so exhausting. Every time we all meet, it's so exhausting. And my immediate thought is, then why are you doing it? If you aren't, exactly as you said, if you're not energized by it, and that's another thing I was really excited. There's quite a major person in property who talks about, you know, we have this kind of work-life balance. I'm not really one of those people because I love what I do. Well, it is my life. It's I don't really, I mean, some bits are a bit boring, you know, and I consider those to be more work, but inherently I just love what I'm doing. So I don't really see this work-life balance. And he talks about actually going on holiday with his family, and in the morning they go off and, yeah, I don't know, go to the beach, go to the pool or something. He does the work because that's what he loves. And then in the afternoon they come together, and that is what he considers to be work-life balance. Everyone gets the best of it. He doesn't sit there tapping his fingers, a bit bored, worried that he can't look at his phone because everyone will be like, you can't do that. And I love that. I love that kind of change, that transition in understanding actually what really energizes and vitalizes you. And yeah, I totally am with you on that.
But it gets started with your thoughts. So when that thought power flows into you, it's neutral. You have a choice. So you can say this is exhausting, or you can say, you know, I like this. And if you can't yet say I like this, maybe ask yourself the question is, what do I like about this? Like, what do I? Because that will start your mind down the right track. You'll start looking for what you do like about it. I want to read you just quickly. I see we're coming in for a landing here, Emma. I just want to read another story for you. So we're talking about perception, right? This attitude of success, moving your thinking, your feeling, you know, your attitude down the right track. Listen to this story now. This story comes from this book,
Amazing.
Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. And as Emma just said, you know, amazing.
I
it
think
was
this
written
book, amongst anything else, I think this had the most dramatic effect
on attitude.
on me. It's unbelievable book.
And it was written by Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone. And W. Clement Stone was an insurance man. In fact, I think he was the wealthiest man in America in the 1970s. He owned an insurance business. And he tells a story about one of the salespeople in his team, right? He says here, I listened to one of our salesmen at Sayo City. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly for those of you that are American. I listened to one of our salesmen at Sayo City in Iowa gripe for over 2 hours one evening. Now, he kept telling me on how he had worked for 2 days at Sayo Center without making a sale. He said it's impossible to sell at Sayo Center because the people there are Holland Dutch, they clannish, and they won't buy from a stranger. Besides, he said, the territory has had crop failure for 5 years. W. Clement Stone then suggested he says here, I suggested that we sell the next day at Sayo Center, the town where he had worked for 2 days without making a sale. So the next morning we drove to Sayo Center. For there, I intended, he said, to prove to the salesman that with a positive mental attitude, for here I intended to prove that the salesman with a positive mental attitude who believed in and used our company's system would sell regardless of the obstacles. And while the salesman was driving, so the salesman's driving, and he says, I closed my eyes, I relaxed, I meditated and conditioned my mind. I kept my mind on the reasons why I should and would sell these people rather than why I wouldn't or couldn't. Once again, it's a choice, right? It's a choice, Emma. What path are you taking your thinking down? And here's what I thought, he says. He says that they're Holland, Dutch, and clannish, therefore they won't buy. He said, that's good. So what's good about it? So he immediately said, they're clannish, they're Holland, Dutch. The salesman is saying they won't buy. He's saying that's good. And now he immediately asks himself the question, what's good about it? It's well known that if you sell just one of a clan, particularly the leader, you can then sell the entire clan. That's a good, if they're clannish, right, Emma? Now I will do whatever I have to do to make that first sale to the right person. He's saying mentally to himself, in the car, talking to himself mentally. I'll do that even if it takes a long time. Again, he claims that the territory has had crop failure for 5 years. He says, what could be more wonderful? The Holland Dutch are marvelous people and they save their money. Also, they are responsible and they want to protect their families and property. And as a matter of fact, they probably have not purchased accident insurance from any other insurance salesman because other salesmen wouldn't even try, for they, like the salesman with whom I'm driving, would have a negative mental attitude. Our policies offer excellent protection at a low cost. In fact, I'll find no competition. I then engaged, he says here, so this is where he obviously got involved in the feeling state, right, Emma? I then engaged in what I term mind conditioning. I repeated to myself with reverence and sincerity, expectation and emotion, please God, help me to make a sale. Please God, help me sell. Help me to sell. Please God, help me sell. Over and over, I repeated, and then I took a nap. He says, and when we arrived at Sayo Center, we called at the bank. Now, the personnel consisted of a vice president, a cashier, and a teller. He says, within 20 minutes, the vice president had purchased the most protection our company was willing to sell, a full unit, and the cashier also purchased a full unit. He says, but the teller, I'll never forget the teller because he didn't buy. In fact, he was the only person that didn't buy in the whole of Sayo Center. He says, and starting with the first place of business next to the bank, we began cold canvassing systematically, store after store, office after office. We interviewed every individual in each establishment. An amazing thing happened. Every person we called on that day purchased a full unit, and there was no exception. So obviously, he wouldn't forget the teller because that's the only person that didn't buy. He says, while we were riding back to the city, I thanked the divine power for the assistance received. Now, why did I succeed in selling in the same place where this other man had failed? Actually, I experienced success for the exact same reason that he experienced failure, except that he was obviously choosing something different from a thought, feeling perspective. He said it was impossible to sell because they were Holland, Dutch, and clannish. That's a negative mental attitude. Now, I knew they would buy because they were Holland, Dutch, and clannish. That's a positive mental attitude. Again, he said it was impossible to sell to them because they had had crop failure for 5 years. That's a negative mental attitude. I knew they would buy because they had crop failure for 5 years. That's a positive mental attitude. And I mean, it's all about perception. Do we see it as a problem, or do we see it as something that could help us actually in the process? It's all about perception, how you view it, and sadly, most people are getting involved in thoughts that are taking them down a track they don't want to go. And, if you've stuck with us till the end, and, these ideas and the stories we've been talking, and, Emma and I's chat has been, you're intrigued by these ideas and you're finding them helpful, I want to really challenge you, like in ending this chat, choose the right thoughts. Start thinking, feeling, and acting in a way that's in harmony with the person that you want to become. Don't let the outside conditions, circumstances, people control you. You control you. And you can control that even in the face of death. You can control that even in the face of being in an environment where it seems impossible. How, Emma, maybe lastly, how do two salespeople, right? They sell the same product, they work in the same marketplace, they serve the same demographic, right? Working for the same sales manager. One is struggling and the other one's killing it. What's the difference, right? It's attitude. It's the thoughts, the feelings, and the actions that we habitually get involved in.
Wow, that was really, exceptionally powerful. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to add too much onto that because that was so good, but you see it time and time again, in, especially within the property world, is, oh, well, I can't do that, or this is not happening to me. And you have to question yourself, well, what is it that you're thinking? And I say it to my kids, oh, I can't do this. And I just say, oh, well, if that's what you think, then that's correct. Absolutely. If you think you can't do it, then you can't do it. And I know that seems quite flippant in comparison to what you've spoken about, but absolutely. This, I think, for me, has been one of the pivotal things to understand and really change the results that are possible. And I think it's absolutely huge, from not selling anything in a whole place to then basically selling to everyone. I mean, what could be more powerful than that? Really incredible. Lee, so I know we're over time now. So yeah, tell people, how can they come and find you? You usually have a webinar coming up. I think you mentioned that was on the 14th. We'll pop that into the chat. But yes, just to tell people where they can come and find you if they want to follow some more of your incredible teachings.
So I'm active on LinkedIn and Facebook. So you can just connect with me on LinkedIn or add me on Facebook. And then we're having a webinar on the 14th of November. It's a Thursday at 10 a.m. UK. And the webinar is called How to Clear the Blocks to Your Abundance. So, Emma and I have been chatting back and forth around subconscious programming, ideas in there, and how, this affects us. And if you want to learn more about how to really get a handle on those ideas and replace those ideas and, get your thinking moving down the right track, right? Thoughts, feelings, actions. If you want to get it all aligned and you want to learn how to clear the blocks to your abundance, we'll drop the link. I mean, this is streaming on a number of different platforms. We'll drop the link in the comments or in the chat section with a link to register for that webinar. Once again, it's called How to Clear the Blocks to Your Abundance. It's an hour webinar, and I'd like to invite you to join us for free if these ideas resonate with you, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Amazing, amazing. Well, look, again, Lee, thank you so much for taking this time with us today. As always, I feel completely invigorated, and I've got this long list of kind of things that, you're really on, and then you work on something else. And this has brought a few things back up to the forefront where I think I'm going to go back and work on those again, to bring myself back up, because it's absolutely so imperative, as I say to everyone that I mentor, you have to work on your mindset every day. It's so important, not just for success, but actually for being happy in life. And I think that is the biggest thing that we all want, don't we? We want to enjoy what we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and not waste it, because we do have the most incredible lives. Oh, amazingly. Well, thank you so much. Would you like me to leave you? Do you want to do just a closing comment before we shut this down?
I think let's end with William James's quote. He said, human beings can change their lives by changing their attitudes of mind.
Amazing.
Thanks for the chat, Emma. I've had an amazing hour here with you. I also, just like you, I enjoy these. So yeah, thanks for hosting it. And hopefully someone in your audience is impacted by these ideas.
I'm sure they will be. I'm sure they will be. Okay, guys, thank you so much.